And we're live with Texas Slim. Welcome to the Redbeard live stream series, which probably needs a better name.
How's
Something
it going?
unifying, like we have Redbeard Radio for the podcast. Great to have you here. And you go by the name Texas Slim. You mentioned we're going to talk today about strategy, future analysis, inner engineering. You have your food intelligence phrasing, which is really interesting. Let's start off with that concept of food intelligence. Can you tell us what that means to you?
Yeah, Brian. Hello to everybody. What that came from, food intelligence, was this year. We all know our food is causing a lot of destruction as far as metabolic destruction. We're 78% obese and overweight as a society. One out of two of us is either diabetic or pre-diabetic.
Mhm.
I come from a part of Texas that was agriculture. I grew up. My grandfather was a farmer. He survived the Great Depression. He decided, a couple of world wars. He survived a lot, and he was a very profitable as far as healthy and as far as a way of life in farming. I looked at the agricultural world this year and I wanted to find out a little bit more. So I went on Harvest. I embedded myself into a harvest company. They didn't know who I was. They didn't know that I was basically writing and that I was, part of the guy, but I had skills. I have a pretty cool skill set.
Uh-huh.
Wanted to see what's going on with our seed.
Yeah. What'd you find?
Source of our seed basically is corrupt. It's been corrupt for a long time. And it's been corrupt by a global food group and these seed companies that basically we rely on to feed us every year.
So, for folks who are not into gardening or farming, what Texas is talking about here is we have the kind of seeds you might imagine your grandparents using, where they would save seeds from year to year. So you grow your tomatoes and you keep the seeds from the best plants, and then you go use those the next year. Or maybe you order from a seed catalog, which is doing the same thing just at scale. That's not how the world works anymore. Those seeds are still available, but they're harder to find, and then we also have situations where if you have your heirloom seeds that you can just grow year after year, but your neighbor has the same plant and your neighbor has ones that are the GMO seeds that are designed to die every year and you cannot replace them, you can't actually stop the GMO DNA from getting into your heirloom and destroying your ability in some cases to actually use your own seeds. So it's not like, well, if these farmers want to do GMO stuff, that's fine. It actually is infecting the rest of our farmland. So that's the background there. Keep on going.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Also, what I found out is, in the 70s, whenever we went off the gold standard, we started creating a lot of false commodities. I call them false commodities. The one that I focused on, I was on wheat harvest, and basically, I found out that each year, the past 3 years, wheat has been less of the harvest, and canola, which is rapeseed, has been more of the harvest.
Hmm.
Canola oil is a false commodity. It is rapeseed. In 1956, the FDA outlawed rapeseed as for any type of human consumption. So basically,
Hmm.
it's a weed. It's a poisonous weed with genetic modifying and everything. We developed it into a type of oil that basically all of society ingest every day of our lives. What I saw out on harvest is they're harvesting less wheat. They're storing less wheat because they're getting less price for wheat, but they're growing more canola and they're getting more cash for canola.
Well, it's in almost
So
every food product. That if you look
exactly,
at
and that's
anything that comes in a
ex-
package, other than say raw meat, almost anything else in the normal grocery store. Like if you go to a grocery store, you see someone's one cart full, maybe half the products have canola in them, but most people aren't thinking about, yeah, my grandparents would have never eaten canola. It
no.
just doesn't even exist. So we've created an entirely new food thing, and that all like we don't know the long term effects for just this one ingredient of canola oil. We don't actually know the long term effects because our grandparents were eating it. So,
Yeah.
and some people say, hey, this is how we're going to feed the world by using this particularly durable kind of plant, but they're ignoring. We don't know what the side effects are.
We don't know the side effects, but you can look at the calendar and almost to the month and to the day that once we started introducing canola and these false commodities into our market, our obesity rates, our overweight, our diabetes have gone lockstep and barrel with stuff like canola, high fructose corn syrup, and let's say soy protein. And they're all basically genetically modified crap, and they're
Mhm.
not good for you. And we are under, we we have some connections that you and I talked to, IFIX Hearts, Dr.
Mhm.
Ovadia. He's a heart doctor. I've talked with him as well, and we're lockstep and barrel with a kind of a marketing plan that's been deceptive for 50 years at least. And we say we don't have any long term effects. Well, we got 50 years, and we're seeing it right now. People are dying. Kids right now between 5 and 11 years old, 46% of them are
Yeah.
overweight or
That's
obese.
the thing for me is that when you start doing anything in your society, whether it's plastics that are mimicking estrogens, as we're now discovering,
Sure.
or like why are our kids obese? If you're an adult and you choose to eat lots of donuts at McDonald's and you get fat and then you die early, that's sad. But it's like, it's sort of your choice.
Mhm.
Oh well, you're drinking lots of Coke. That's unfortunate. I wish you wouldn't. But as
Right.
soon as a prepubescent kid, that kid didn't have a choice. And so, are we setting the parents up to make good decisions? And if we're not, then we as a society are failing those kids. That it's not like if you're fat by age 11, you can just turn to a teenager and like, oh, I'm making my own decisions now. You've been given all
Exactly.
this heritage, this food heritage, this cooking knowledge heritage, this what is real food heritage from your parents, which are given that by society at large, as well as their own parents. And these kids, like it's not a level playing field. They're not starting off in a good position, and that fat you get before puberty, getting rid of that, it's possible, but it's a big ask. And especially given the food intelligence you've gotten is just eat whatever and eat heavily processed foods. I was just at the grocery store and I saw an overweight person, and I knew this was going to be the case, but I just looked at their cart as they're leaving, and they have not just mac and cheese in single boxes, but entire trays of multiple mac and cheese type boxes. And I think, well, yeah, that's just a bunch of starch, but also all those things have these little cheese packets that don't contain any food in them, powdered
Right.
cheese, right?
Right.
I'm
It's a false
thinking,
commodity. Yeah.
but how can I communicate to this person? But then again, they're adults, they're making their own choices. So back to children, food intelligence, and linking that up with some of these other topics you want to talk about. What is our solution to go help our kids be healthier and live healthier lives?
Well, as adults, we have to, and I tell this to everybody because how I started thinking about this was I thought about how my grandfather lived, how he
Mhm.
had to live, how he enjoyed living. And it was
Yeah.
very basic and it was very simple. We've all heard farm to table and all that kind of stuff. And that's great. It's cliche, whatever. But the single most important thing that I am starting to do is I'm looking at heritage more than anything. You brought up the word heritage.
Hmm.
We have to look before the last 50 years. How were we sourcing our meats? How were
Yep.
we sourcing our animal proteins? What industries existed? How did we look at diet back then? And what has happened since then that has basically led us to where we are now, evolved us into a mindset that is actually pretty dangerous for us because it's rent sinking. It's a form of high time preference, low value living. It's not low time preference, high value living. And that's what we need to look at. We need to understand that we have to bring some patience, we have to bring some wisdom and heritage into our understanding of what food really is. And that gets pretty biblical for me. If you look back throughout the history of time, we really did put a lot of emphasis in the whole art of food preparation and
Hmm.
food production and food consumption.
One of the easiest
Why aren't
ways
we
is,
there now? We take it for granted.
yeah, how much time do you spend per day, or does someone in your household spend per day making food?
Right.
And we can even look at other cultures even today and say, well, the French spend, I'm making this up, but twice as much time, four times as much time. Well, why
Yes.
is that? Are they just stupid? Or is there something that they still have that we've lost? And then you look at Michael Pollan's work, the Omnivore's Dilemma guy, where he looks at what are the factors involved in obesity? Well, one of the greatest factors is how many meals a week do you cook at home? There's a direct relationship, now causal, correlative, whatever, but
Right.
between the more often you cook at home, which means at least one human has the knowledge of how to cook. And we could add to that they're cooking real food, not mac and cheese with powdered cheese.
Mhm.
Then suddenly the obesity of everyone involved next to that human starts to go down from just
Yes.
that one thing.
And it can be that simple. And there's a lot of very smart and intelligent people working in labs as we speak that are designing ways to hijack your taste buds that
Mhm.
basically create a chemical rush in your head, just like a dopamine rush does whenever we get a like on social media. They're very powerful people that are engineering ways to make us basically fat, lazy, and stupid. And we have to be aware of that. It starts with awareness. And this is not a judgment on anybody, but it is something that we need to understand that it is a wake up call because it's about to get worse.
But hold on.
Yep.
We have the problem of knowledge where
Right.
you talked about canola oil.
Hmm.
Someone listening to this, maybe it's the first time they've come across the canola oil is a serious problem. Okay, that's fine.
Sure.
But canola oil is not the only problem. There's, I would dare say, the majority of ingredients on your average thing of processed food, there's something wrong with them. So a lot of people, they go, okay, yeah, there's problems. I should go eat fewer donuts and less soda and eat more real food. That's fine. More vegetables.
Hmm.
But to go any deeper, given this huge knowledge problem, how do you actually know what to eat? Where do you trust to learn from? Once you realize that the food pyramid was a lie, when I was a kid, cereal, milk, orange juice, that was a balanced breakfast. I had the heart healthy label right on the box. And now we realize, oh, those people were all paid off by big food, by big
Sure.
ag, and
Right.
that's poisoning us and killing us. So if you can't really trust your parents or your grandparents because, like your parents, they were indoctrinated with the food pyramid. Your grandparents, well, you can't get that kind of food anymore because even if your grandparents said, well, you should eat a lot of beans, green beans are good for you. Even the soil that the green beans is cooked in is not the same. So you might think
Right.
to yourself and you might read about, oh, yeah, broccoli is going to give me all of the nutrient X that I need. But the modern day broccoli only has 20% of that much nutrient. So
Right.
even if you did exactly what your grandparents told you to do and exactly how they ate, you wouldn't be eating the same thing. So it's a problem of there's so much wrong and the problem is so big. How can anyone like what's the first thread to pull on to start increasing our food intelligence?
How I'm looking at it is I look at it with strategy, future analysis, and inner engineering, and I try to team all three of those up to
Mhm.
create a plan. My strategy is independently. What I'm going to do is I'm in the state of Texas. I'm organizing and basically engineering a Texas beef initiative. I'm reaching out to every local beef producer in the state of Texas, and I'm going to be creating a decentralized way of finding your local protein source,
What does decentralized mean in this specific context?
not relying on big ag, not relying on impact, the medical, pharmaceutical, our agricultural complex as we've known it. This is the baby steps. This is the grassroots stuff that anybody can do. I'm not saying everybody's going to go to a farmer's market every
So
day.
so walk with me here, walk to me into
Sure.
the year 2030.
Hmm.
Let's say you're wildly successful.
Right.
What does Texas look like if you win big over the next 9 years?
We have 1,000 producers, suppliers, and processors that are micro businesses instead of the four major meat processing companies that we have in the United States.
And how does a person, your average meat eater in Texas, how do their lives look different when you win big?
When we win big, they what they do is they erase the cholesterol lie that we've been told. They erase the fat fiction lie that we've been told.
Let me back up here. What is the tactical like? What is my daily life as a
Sure,
Texan?
sure,
I buy my meat from wherever. I'm
right.
assuming you're saying you're going to buy it from. There's some other way I'm going and getting food for my family. What
You
does that
bet.
look
Saturday morning, I wake up, I get the kids saying, "Hey, we're gonna go take a road trip today. We're gonna go and we're gonna go play in the river. Hey, we're down by the Frio. We're in Hondo, Texas. There's a place that they do grass-fed beef. They have a wonderful tradition. We're gonna go discover what livestock's all about. We're going to get a quarter of a cow that's going to last us probably let's say 3 to 4 months. So we know that we're going to be food secure for the next 4 months. We're going to spend a day as a family. We're going to basically source our protein in a different way. That's going to lead to conversations. That's going to lead to food preparation conversation. That's going to lead to more of a community based system of thinking.
So you're not talking about a food shift so much as you're talking about a cultural shift that involves food.
Yes, by
Yeah.
far.
That's an
Exactly.
interesting thing
100%.
because we have so many folks saying, well, drink more water so you don't drink as much Coke,
Right.
which is good as far as it goes. That's great.
Sure.
Or eat McDonald's once less per week. That's
Right.
great.
Mhm.
But it's not the same thing as the cultural shift you're talking about.
Well, and we're going to go through a cultural shift right now. In the last 2 years, almost, we've been locked down in ways mentally, emotionally, physically, financially. What
Yeah.
I see is that I'm rediscovering my state of Texas, and what I get to do is I get to go and actually look at its heritage. I get to create a lifestyle again that was forged in the past, but actually now it's almost going to be by necessity
Hmm.
because I'm not going to be flying to Thailand as much anymore as I used to. I'm not going to be flying to New York City as much as I used to. That's by
Well,
my choice. But
it's
what I'm going
interesting.
to do, I'm going to create a whole new paradise that's been right in front of me the whole time. So it is
Mhm.
a lifestyle switch. It is a new form of living in a new lifestyle to basically forge ahead with.
What's luxury? We had the idea of
Right.
luxury being, oh, traveling to a
Exactly.
new place. Like I can tell you about the nicest hot spring in Iceland. Oh, wonderful. That's one
Right.
kind of luxury. Or I'm on a first name basis with my butcher is a different kind of luxury.
Yep.
And that's which of those actually matters more. For me, it's like, well, I have my butcher, I have my grocer, I have my local people. And yes, I do occasionally set foot in the big grocery store, but not often. And I try to avoid it. I
Sure.
mostly have my local, very small grocer order the things that I want if she doesn't already have them.
Mhm.
Or I go to my butcher and I say, well, I want this right here. And they'll go, oh, well, let's get you just the thing that you want here.
Right.
Very different world than the world that I grew up in, where the idea of a butcher or a greengrocer was this antiquated dark ages depression era nonsense. Like no one does that anymore. But now it's like, oh well, actually having your local butcher where you can talk about exactly what's in the meat and he can say, oh yeah, I inspect every animal as it comes off the truck.
Exactly. And that's a form of decentralized thinking that it's like my grandfather, they had a party line, right? They didn't have a
Mhm.
full phone system. It was hard to reach the outside world in a lot of ways. You could do it, but most of the communication was done on a party line. I want to create a party line to source my protein to my brain. That's what I'm doing with decentralization.
Hmm.
That's going to become my lifestyle in a way that, like you said, it was kind of archaic. Maybe people laugh of it because, I think we've even lost understanding why do we desire what we desire?
Well, we were pushing for efficiency, which back
Hmm.
when a chicken in every pot was a big deal, it was there's people who are hungry, let's stop that. But now no one's hungry. That actually the poorest people are the most obese. So
Exactly.
we completely solved the efficiency question, but like in so many things, we ended up losing the quality in order to get the quantity. And
Yes.
now the true luxury is things like pastured eggs. If you've never had an organic pastured egg or a grain-free pastured egg, it bears almost no resemblance to the cheapest eggs at the grocery store. And the price is 3 to 4 times as much depending on where you are. But it's not the same food. The nutrition of it isn't the same. The kind of fats you're getting is not the same. Omega 3s and omega 6s. They're
Right.
both eggs, but only in the most dictionary sense of the definition. They're nothing alike. And when you put
Well,
one in the same pan together, you can see like, oh, these are completely different things I'm eating here.
yeah, you can, one pasture raised eggs is just as good as three store-bought eggs. If
I
people think
think
about.
I think of it as dangerous. A store that standard concentrated
Mhm.
operation. These huge egg farms where the birds never see daylight. They're trapped in cages. They can't open their wings. We have a nutritional, not just deficiency, but imbalance where you're pumping your body full of omega sixes and God knows what else.
Right.
But then you also have the energetic. You're causing suffering to these critters. Whereas
Exactly.
a chicken that is safe from predators because there's a farmer around keeping the chicken safe, but besides that, can run around, eat bugs all day long, and yeah, maybe have a little bit of grain, maybe not.
Sure.
The energetic quality of that of the meat of the eggs is totally different. And there's some people who are vegan because they don't want to be cruel to animals. Good for them. Pastured chicken eggs is just so different. And it's the same thing. I think when you look at a wild caught salmon versus a farm salmon, and the
Hmm.
color is just totally different because they're not the same. I've
Yes.
gone sometimes. I'm out traveling, and so I go have a steak at some restaurant, and I think, wow, this is what most people think of when they think of steak, and it's not very. It doesn't taste very good because the steak I do eat is always grass fed, unless I'm at a restaurant somewhere, in which case I taste steak
Sure.
because that's probably from a concentrated animal feeding operation where the animals are completely squished together. There's no grass, there's no sunlight, and that's what we think of as steak, but it's just not so. So that was your when you just said three eggs to equal one. I was like, no, it's actually
Yeah, it's not even well, you can't it's probably even a bad comparison because you can't compare, right? You can't
yeah,
compare grass-fed beef to a steak you get into a regular restaurant, especially a corporate restaurant.
yeah,
And, that's what we have to understand, and you bring up a good point, and I haven't gone down this rabbit hole yet with most people because it's very intense, but, we're in supply chain shortages right now. There's gonna be
yeah,
food supply shortages going into winter. They've showed their cards. We know what's gonna happen. For most people that do not understand, there will be a short-term food supply shortage. What they are really organizing and what is going to happen is not going to be a food supply shortage because we can consume. There's so much food we can consume right now. What's going to happen is we're going to go through a nutrition starvation,
hmm.
and this is happening, either it be maliciously or if it being because the soil is dead or that the animals are so stressed as they're being farmed and raised and processed. We're not getting the nutrition that we need,
Yeah.
and that
To restate what you're saying here for some people who maybe we just lost a little bit is
sure.
there may or may not be shadowy evil characters who are trying to manipulate our food supply. Regardless of the state of that, we have
Right.
very real measurable deficiencies in our soil, which are showing up as deficiencies in our animals. And also, a huge amount of our meat production comes from CAFOs and from unhealthy animal situations that are cruel to the animals and are causing all kinds of illnesses. That's why they're pumped full of antibiotics, all these animals,
Exactly.
because otherwise, like they have medicated feed because otherwise these animals that are shoved together living in their own crap they would die, so they just pump them full of drugs, and
Hmm.
that's the current system we have. So you don't need to assume a shadow evil actor for what Texas Slim here is saying to be a reality. If you believe that people are trying to say make us all eat vegetarian and eat bugs and all that, that may also be the case. But you don't need to believe that in order to think we're coming up against something that's new here.
Yeah, we're coming in right now. I do know for a fact they're manipulating the beef market as we know it right now, the cattle industry as we know it. The processors are not processing as much cattle. They're saying there's a cattle shortage. There's not a cattle shortage. They're doing this hand in hand as they're doing the climate change basically that's happening right now. They're having the conference in Glasgow starting on Halloween. At the same time, they've had the UN Food Supply Summit. So they've been putting together some plans, and what they're trying to do is damage the cattle industry in a way to where they can introduce a new fake commodity. That fake commodity is going to be fake meat. That
Inside
fake meat
protein.
has pea
Yeah.
protein in it, which is
Mhm.
once again was outlawed by the FDA, and but they're going to be using it now because it's genetically modified. Soy protein, which is horrible for men. We all know this. I don't have to go down that rabbit hole there. But what they're going to do is they're going to try to kill the beef industry as much as they can and then introduce a new product, which is going to be just as harmful as the overly processed carbohydrates they've been introducing to us the last 50 years.
There's so much doom and gloom here. Give us a ray of sunshine. What can a person who perceives this and assigns that what you're saying might be
Yeah,
true, what can an individual do, whether they're in Texas
sure.
or somewhere else, to get a bit more control over their lives and take a bit better care of their own health and their families?
The most simple thing to do, well, today is Friday. Okay, do one little thing. Either find a local butcher, find a local protein source. That's it. If you let's say, okay, I'm in Austin, Texas. Austin has a lot of good restaurants. Well, all I have to do is instead of Saturday morning watching Netflix or whatever it is people do on a Saturday morning, I can drive within 1 hour or 30 minutes even, and I can actually even just drive on the other side of the river in Austin, Texas, and I can find a different source of protein. That's your first step. It doesn't have to be complicated. I don't have to buy ground beef, or I don't have to buy steaks. I don't have to buy any type of animal protein, because a lot of these local producers, independent guys, they're doing pork, they're doing chicken, they're doing beef, and they're doing vegetables as well. So
Mhm.
my lifestyle changes. I'm going to spend 3 to 4 hours sourcing my protein for the next month. That's it. Anybody in
Love it.
any city in the United States can do that. I don't care if you're in LA, or if I don't care if you're Dallas. I don't even care if you're in New York City. It is possible. If you can't go get it, they'll mail it to you right now. So it is
Mhm.
just a little bit of awareness. Once you do that, your life starts making changes. I cook in a cast iron skillet 90% of all of my food. I
Love it.
use tallow. I use lard. I don't use cooking oils. I will
Mhm.
never ingest any type of canola ever again in my life, nor
Mhm.
any other seed oil. Small steps lead you to a lot of different doors that open up. We don't have to solve it all at once. It took us 50 years to get here. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, man.
I love it. I love a very simple step. Folks, to go learn more about this journey, I have Texas Slim's Twitter handle there on the screen there, Modern T-Man, to go follow more of that. Thanks for being on the show, Texas.
Hey, I appreciate you, Redbeard.